Well, I'm excited to start this. The last service is kind of nice because we have two services right now, and and with LifeVie, like the last service, I bawled my eyes out before I even started, and so I'm just like, I got that out of the way, thank goodness, so I got to look manly and stuff. So, but we're starting a new series today called "When Life Gives You," and really lemons, and so and that's what I want to talk about over the next few weeks because let's be honest, man, right now we're living in a lemon world. Right? We're living in all kinds of things that are going on in our world and issues and things that are taking place. And so that's what we want to kind of really dig into today. And so what does it look like to make lemonade out of lemons? And so to kind of give you a basis of where I want to go with this and how I want to help you in this journey and how do we want to walk along, is I'm going to be honest with you. There's going to be moments that I'm pretty sure that I'm going to offend everybody. That's going to be a given. And I'm really good at offending people, but I'm also really good at loving people too. And I want to walk through that process with you. I want to help you along in this journey because I think that we have an opportunity never before seen by our culture right now, that it's our time to shine and it's our time to make a difference in our world. And so let me give you something simple, right? So I don't know, I'm not a lemonade guy. I mean, like in a sense, I don't make lemonade. I never have. I go to the store and I buy Country Time lemonade. Is anybody Country Time out there? Country? Yes, right? There's nothing better than a Country Time lemonade. And so also at the same time, like there's just something about going to a fair and you get the lemon shake-ups. Anybody with me? Lemon shake-ups. Online, lemon shake-ups, everybody. Oh my goodness, there's just something good. There's just some cool sound of when you hear them go, and you're just like, yes, that's coming. Like there's something about lemon shake-ups. And so, but the ingredients to lemonade is simple. It's water, it's sugar, and it's, of course, the main ingredient, lemon, right? You can't have lemonade without lemons. Maybe it's artificial lemonade, but whatever. You still can't have it without it. But the problem is how do we understand, how do we make lemonade out of lemons? And so what I want to propose to you over the next few weeks is that we are the water, because that's really what we are. The situations we come across are the lemons, and ultimately Jesus represents the sugar, okay? Because sugar tastes good. So that's why I'm giving Jesus that detail of how we're going to compare them today. And so I want to share with you, I looked this up. I didn't know this story. I had to look it up because I was super curious. But I wanted to find out who coined the phrase, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. I wanted to find out who made that. So this is what I found. So there's a story behind it. There's a guy named Marshall Wilder, and he lived in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. Now, Marshall was, first of all, does anybody know Marshall Wilder? Okay, it's not shocked. So if you're watching online, don't lie because you can Google it. So Marshall Wilder, he was an American dwarf actor. So he was probably the first normal sized person to act. Actually, it talks about that a little bit in this memorial that another guy by the name of Elbert Hubbard wrote. So and it talks about how Marshall Wilder was not only an American dwarf actor, but he was also a humorist. And then, so he wrote this guy named Elbert Hubbard wrote this memorial called The King of Jesters. And here's what he says about Marshall Wilder. I'm telling you, you have a story to go tell people now where where this came from, okay? It says this, he's talking about Marshall Wilder in this memoir. He was a walking refutation of that dogmatic statement, mens sana in corpora sano. I don't speak Latin. So basically this means a healthy mind and a healthy body. So that's really what that means. It says his was a sound mind and an unsound body. He proved the eternal paradox of things. He cashed in on his disabilities because he was an American dwarf actor. He picked up the lemons that fate had sent him and started a lemonade stand. Later on, so the writer of this, Elbert Hubbard, he coined the phrase, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. This is where that comes from. So basically the early 1900s is where this comes from. Now here's the reality, is our life is filled with lemons right now, isn't it? I mean, it's miserable. In fact, I almost wish, I mean, you're watching online right now, but I would almost wish that we would just say no to social media for a while. No Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, because it is literally destroying the lives of so many people. I mean, this is our lemon right now. The lemon is our social media. For some of us, what's going on right now with the riots, and we talk about racism, and I would even go as further to say I don't even know if it's necessarily a racism. I don't even think that's the foundation. I think the issue is more of an ideology. We're having problems with our ideologies, and we're not coming together in a world of mixed ideologies. If you actually read through the Old Testament and the New Testament, here's what is so fascinating. The narrative between the Old Testament and the New Testament, the biblical writers had over about 25 years span, was to teach us that we are not to take political stance. Now think about this. In the world they lived in, they lived under the Babylonian Empire, they lived under the Roman Empire, they lived under the Assyrian Empire, and yet they were saying, let's not take a stance on politics, let's take a stance on God. Let's talk about him. Because he's the one that brings order into a chaotic world, right? That's the narrative. I mean, think about it. In the book of Judges in the Old Testament, what was it all about? You don't need a king. I'm your king. Let me be your king. And because they couldn't tolerate it, everybody else has got a physical human king. Why can't we have a king? And he gave him a king. And Saul turned out to be not such a good king, right? Then we have David. And everybody like David, a man after God's own heart. But then what did David do? This ongoing issue of the political system, even in the Israelite culture, was still a lemon. So at the end of the day, what's happening is, in our world, we have lemons, and these are our issues. Some of us, we're struggling with addictions right now. This is our lemon. Some of us have been struggling with some kind of issue that's been going on in our life for decades to come, and we've yet to deal with it. But it's a lemon that we continue to hold on to. It's just fascinating to think about how many of us have a lemon, whether it's addiction, depression, suicide rate is now skyrocketing in our culture and around the world. There's an issue. But the bigger issue, the church is holding a lemon. And the church, at the end of the day, is supposed to be peacemakers. That's what God calls us to. That's what he tells us to do, right? He says, blessed are the peacemakers for what? Can anybody finish that? For they will be called children of God. We can't be called children of God if we're too busy fighting one another, right? And I don't know where you are today, and I don't know what you're thinking about, and I don't know what you're doing, and I don't know how much this is challenging you. But our opportunity is now, and I want to show you that today. I want to give you a picture of what that looks like. So the Apostle Paul, what I think is super fascinating about this is that the Apostle Paul, if there's ever a guy who got it outside of Jesus, it's him. Why? Because he lived under Roman occupation. I mean, the Roman rule of the world was the greatest culture, the greatest civilization that's ever existed. The Roman rule was even greater than the United States of America. Let me just go ahead and throw that out there to you. Why? Because they did it for centuries. I mean, centuries upon centuries upon centuries. Nobody overtook them for a very, very long time. I mean, it's the greatest thing we've ever seen, the Roman Empire. They created the road system. They created the message system, sending out messages, getting things out back and forth. They created, in a sense, a lot of the technology, even though it's 10 times better today, they created the foundation to the technology that we have today. And yet, the Apostle Paul, the first century church, the leaders of the church, they're the ones that lived under this Roman rule. And we're sitting here and ask the question, how did they live under it? Because the Christian church should be sitting here asking the question, how did they live through this Roman rule, that's Roman occupation? Because if they can do it, then we should be paying attention as United States Americans, right? That's what we should be doing. We should be seeing, how does that work? And here is exactly what he did. He wrote a letter to the church in Rome. Now, why is Rome a significant thing? Why would we look at a letter to Rome? Because the church in Rome was in the heart of the Roman Empire. And so they were dealing with issues that most of the world at this time was not dealing with. Christians and a very multiple gods kind of culture. And knowing that, if you're not Jewish, it means you're even worse. So what did the Apostle Paul have to say to the church in Rome? Here's what he says. He says, because of our faith, Christ has brought us into this place of undeserved privilege. So we've been given privilege that we don't deserve because of Jesus' death, resurrection. So we're kind of elevated to this awesome position that God has put us in. Is everybody with me, right? Does this make sense so far? Where we stand, and we confidently and joyfully look forward to sharing God's glory. Then he says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials. What? We can be excited? Like we can get pumped up about the fact that we're going through trials and temptations and hurts and problems and issues. And that's what he's saying. We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop, what's that word? Endurance. It's something that's going to keep us moving forward. It's something that's going to give us the battle to keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting because Jesus did it, right? And so he goes on to say, and endurance develops strength of character. Woo! Do you know how I can tell your character? By seeing what you put on social media. Right? Do you know how I can tell your character? It's by how you treat one another. How I treat one another. In the early going of this, I'll be honest with you. I'm an awful person at times. I have let my sin get to me. And so at the end of the day, what's happened in the early going, I let everything, all this thing that's going around to dictate me, and I started getting super opinionated about this all. And I get it, and I still have an opinion, but early going, Liz looked at me, she says, Nate, I thought we were peacemakers in our home. And I said, oh my gosh. You're right. We exist to be peacemakers. So at the end of the day, my opinion really doesn't matter about the situation because my goal is to get people to Jesus. My goal isn't to get you to become a Republican. My goal isn't to get you to become a Democrat. My goal isn't to get you to like masks. My goal isn't to get you to not like masks. My goal isn't to get you to take a side of an ideology of whether racism or not and who do we fight for and who do we stand for and do Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. That is not my position. My position as a follower of Jesus is to bring peace to a broken world by helping people see who Jesus the Christ is. In church, we have an opportunity. We do. It's not an Avenue Church thing. It's not a Wesleyan Church thing. It's not a Crossroads Church thing. It's not Storyside. It's not a Free Methodist. It's not an OCF church. It's a church, capital C, church thing. And we have an opportunity right now that we probably won't get again for a very long time to be exactly what Jesus has called us to be. And endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation. That means that our character has the opportunity to grow our hope and the love that we have in Jesus' death and resurrection. We have an opportunity now to show the world the love of who God really is. He goes on to say this, and this is what's kind of finishes it. And this hope will not lead to disappointment. How many of us have just been down, man? This has just been a total like, ugh, right? He said, this hope it won't lead to disappointment. No, what does it do? It says, for we know how dearly God loves us because he has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with his love, The brother of Jesus, James, he writes this. He says, dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. How many Christians have you seen like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. The virus is here. Bring it on. I haven't seen anybody do that hardly. I'm not saying that there hasn't, but I'm sitting here thinking, this is it. This is what I was trying to get us to today. Like, we needed to find a way to celebrate. This is it. He's saying, come on, church, this is it. We got to wake up because this is the moment to shine. You'd have no idea. When the death happened of Jesus, that was the down. Man, that was crazy. But when he rose again, oh my goodness, you couldn't shut us up. You couldn't keep us quiet. Do you know why? Because we saw him, we touched him, we ate with him, we talked with him. And not only did we do it, but 500 other people got to see him and experience him and talk to him for the next 40 days. Then he left and we're like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Then all of a sudden on the day of Pentecost, they're celebrating this festival called Pentecost. And they're like, oh my goodness, this is here. And so the Holy Spirit comes and boom, like this was their moment to shine. Then now at this point, listen to this. This is what happens next. If you read history, if you read about Josephus, if you read some of the Roman authorities of the day, they had history writers to make Caesar look good. And yet, who did they talk about? They talked about this Christos. They talked about this Jesus centuries later, first century, later on in the first century, second century, third century. And what are they talking about? They're talking about this growing group of followers of Jesus, these followers of the way, later coined as Christians. They talked about that. They were being killed. They were being crucified. They were being destroyed, and yet they couldn't stop them. Why is that? I can guarantee you this. They weren't arguing with the Roman government. They weren't taking sides. History doesn't show us that. They were doing things for people that even their own Roman people wouldn't do for their own people. They were taking care of these babies that they were being thrown out. History teaches us that. They were taking care of the wives whose men were being crucified because they were talking about Jesus. They were taking care of their children. How in the world do we think that the church got out of the first, second, and third century? It wasn't because they came in fighting. They loved like no one's ever loved. They cared for people that no one's ever cared for. They did the things that people don't normally do. Why? How? Because they had the Holy Spirit living in them. And the brother of Jesus, don't you think if Jesus was your brother and he rose from the dead, don't you think like, I don't know this guy. I'm not going to die for him. And yet there he is. Troubles of any kind come your way, consider an opportunity for great joy. He goes on to say, for you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a, what's that word say? Chance. Does it say it will? Does it say it will? No, it doesn't, does it? It says your endurance has a chance to grow, meaning it may not. Because our perspective may be different. It may be absolutely different. He goes on to say, so let it grow. Has anybody ever watched The Lorax? Anybody know I'm talking about the movie The Lorax? You have to, and let it grow, let it grow. Like that, okay, okay, all right. Kids, I hope you're watching this and loving it for me. So for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Think about this. Let me talk about faith just real fast, because in the New Testament, when you watch people get healed, is it typically Jesus, like, oh yeah, they're healed, or is it because of something else? What does Jesus typically say when somebody gets healed? What does he say? Yeah, that's right. Because your faith has healed you. Go back and read the Gospels. When it says about when miraculous things happen, when people are bleeding, or when they're lame, they have some kind of skin disease, when they're blind, whatever. What does he say to them? Your faith has healed you. He didn't say, I healed you. He said, your faith has healed you. What does that mean? People had an opportunity to get to Jesus, and they did what they could to get to Jesus. And when people get to Jesus, they get healed. Do you know why they get healed? Because those people want to get to Jesus. Because that's faith. Faith isn't showing up to a church at a building. Faith isn't saying that I believe that I'm a Christian. Jesus doesn't even tell us that we're Christians because we tell people we're Christians. How does he tell us? They will know you're my disciples by what? How well you love one another. How well you love one another. Come on, church. We're focusing way too much on the lemons and not enough on how do we make lemonade. Right? We're so consumed with being right that we've lost what it's to be good. We're so consumed with being right that we've lost what it is to be good. When hard times come our way, and it will come again. I'm not saying it's going to be this. It could be a career loss, and maybe some of us are going through that right now, and maybe that's your lemon. For some of us, it's saying, you know what? Well, I'm going to stick to my guns, and this is your lemon. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe you're going through an addiction right now. Maybe you're struggling with a relationship that you're going through right now. I don't know. Maybe you're having a hard time with your children right now. Maybe you don't know how to react. Maybe you're struggling to figure out what is the next step in your life. This is your lemon. What are you going to do to make lemonade? Now, before I actually finish this, here's what I want you to know, is that when we hear this thing that, how do I make lemonade out of lemons, right? How do I make lemonade out of lemons? So a lot of times we say, okay, what do I have to do? But I'm trying to help us understand, it's not really about what you have to do, it's who you're going to let to do it for you. That's the difficult decisions that most of us are going to have to make. What does it look like to allow God to do the things in our life? Because here's the reality. God is the only one that can bring goodness, maturity, and lemonade from lemons in your life. He's the only one. No matter how hard we try. See, the moment that we start trying to do good, the moment that we start trying to be a better person, that's called religion. The more that you allow God into your life, the more that you say, God, I want what you want. I want to have what you have. I want my heart to beat for what your heart beats for. God, use me and move me to do the things that you want me to do. When you start thinking about those, then he starts doing that. When you start praying, God, use me today, use me tomorrow, allowing me to do those things, then he's going to start making lemonade in your life, and those are when things are going to start making sense. But there's a togetherness in this. You can't have a lemonade without the sugar, lemons, and the water, right? It's you, it's him, and it's the stuff in our lives. And we got to allow him to take over those stuff so that when we do have a lemonade in our life, what do? We drink it and we share it. Right? You don't go to a lemonade stand and like, well, here you go. And then the lemon stand shuts up, right? No. We want to share it. Because that's what it looks like. That's the point of the church when we get this correct. When we do this the way that God has asked us to do, we put our desires, our wants aside, and we allow God to move in and through us. That's when the world changes. So what I started to do, I'll just be honest with you. So what I started to do on social media, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start doing this. I'm going to start sharing verses that are about love. That's what I'm doing. Start sharing verses that are about love. And about anything that Jesus talks about when it comes to peacemakers and things like that. Because I thought, you know what? It doesn't matter. Because no matter how much I share my opinion online, nobody cares. Who cares? The people who agree with you. Right? It is. Because we want, how many likes do we want? I got 10 likes on that baby. Right? That's what we want. We want to know that people are on my side. And Jesus is kind of like, I'm not on either of your sides. You're both wrong. When you look at Scripture and you look at the Old Testament and you look at the New Testament, we're wrong. Because when we take sides, we stand against people, as I talked about last week. We don't take sides. We stand for Jesus. Because only he can make lemonade out of lemons. Here's the big idea I want you to get today. God uses trials and struggles in life to grow us and squeeze lemonade from the lemons of life. We need to embrace the trials. We need to embrace the pain. And we need to rejoice and say, God, how can you use this to improve my life to you? How can you use this to improve my life to you? All right, to end. Do I have any Lord of the Rings fans out there? Any nerds? Come on, let me see. Hand up high. Hand up high. Any nerds out there in the family world, upstairs, online? Is that it? I just got two? Just two, three? You guys. So when you go home today, you need to go on and rent Lord of the Rings, watch the extended edition. You'll be up until about, midnight tonight. And it's gonna rock your world. So in the very first one, A Fellowship of the Ring, so they got these, I think it's 9 guys, Nick, is that right? 9 in the fellowship. So I like to call them Gandalf's merry men. So it's just kind of how it is. So anyways, in the Fellowship of the Ring, the first movie, so there's this ring, and it's a battle between good and evil, darkness, night, and there's this ring that's kind of the thing that we got to destroy. It's destroying life, right? It's really the lemon. The ring is the lemon, okay? And so so in this part, they're in this cave, and they don't know where to go. They're like stuck. And so Gandalf sits down, and he's just kind of like thinking, and trying to, he's got his long, cool pipe going. Gandalf the Grey, he's a wizard, okay? And so Gandalf the Grey is just thinking or whatever. Frodo's this little hobbit, this little guy, right? I mean, the world would destroy him because he's a hobbit, right? It's just, there's nothing, it's a hobbit. They drink all the time, they eat all the time, right? So that's just what they do. And then he goes, Frodo says to him, because Gollum, there's this weird looking creature, he's in a part of the movies. He comes, and he's following them along the way because he at one time got the ring, and there's a whole series on that. You get to the Hobbit and you learn some of those things and stuff. So anyways, he's got this ring, it changes him, and Gollum's been following him for days because he's trying to get the ring back. And then he looks, and he's just like, he asked Gandalf the Grey, Frodo asked Gandalf the Grey about all the situation that's going on. And he says this. He says, I wish this would have never come to me. Is that right? I want to make sure I said that right. No, I wish none of this had ever happened. I wish none of this would ever have happened. Don't you all wish that? I mean, don't we wish that? I wish none of this would have ever happened. I wish the virus didn't come. I wish this racism and rioting things would have never come. When we lose loved ones, I wish that would have never happened. And when we go through trials, when we get fired, when we go through all kinds of stuff, I wish this never happened. Here's what Gandalf the Grey says. This is so good. He says, so do all who live to see such times. Right? Isn't that heartfelt? It just kind of gets you. It makes me go watch the movie again, right? So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. I mean, how many of our grandparents or parents, when World War II was here, wish they'd never been here? World War I, right? The Great Depression, the Gulf War, the Korean War, Vietnam War. I wish this would have never have happened. He says, but that is not for them to decide. What we're going through right now is not for us to decide. He says, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. What are we going to do with the time that is given to us? There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the work of evil. Now, you want to go watch the movie, don't you? You're like, no, not really. I just gave you the best part of the movie, I think. So anyways, this is so cool, but this is what? But there's good in the world. C.S. Lewis says this. He says, hardship often prepares an ordinary person for extraordinary destiny. Let me say that again. Hardship often prepares an ordinary person for an extraordinary destiny. An extraordinary destiny. The question is are we going to use the lemons that God has given us to use? And so what is your lemon? What is your lemon? Is it trying to be right? Is that your lemon? You should write right on there and cut it up. What's your lemon? Is it a health issue? What is your lemon? Is it trying to figure out what's going on in the world? And I can't stand this. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's school. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's you lost a job. What is your lemon? And so what I'm telling you today is when you cut the lemon and be done with the lemon. But use it, right? Because when we use the lemons in our life, we can do extraordinary things because we should be rejoicing about what God is wanting to do with us and through us. Because when water is just lemon, if you're losing weight, this is really good for you. But that's pretty lemony. Goodness, that was too much lemon. But when you add the sugar, though, that's what makes it bearable. Right? What's that? Oh, man. I tried this last service. I actually did pretty well with it. That's actually pretty good. Anybody want to taste it? It's pretty good. Um, yeah, just like country time. And I don't know what to do or how to tell you this, but it's being used.